Unfortunately, our speakerphone is right next to a router that's making a lot of noise. That's why you're hearing a little bit of background noise.
Okay, here we go. Hi, this is Steve Gillmor, and this is the Gillmor Gang. We're coming to you from somewhere in the Pacific Midwest. Does that make any sense? Yeah, it does. And Brett Slatkin is one of our guests, and he's nodding like it's not. It doesn't. Is nodding mean affirmative? Shaking your head no, like it doesn't make sense. Can we hear you?
Yep. How's it going?
It's going well. Also from the new Borg, Google, is Chris Messina. Welcome, Chris. We'll get to you on video in just a second here. There you go. And formerly of the new Borg and formerly of the old Borg, Robert Scoble and Kevin Marks.
What's up?
Hey there.
Okay, so you guys are all down there in the state of Texas, or whatever that means.
Yes.
The state of mind known as Texas.
We're using all the bandwidth that AT&T has left.
How's that going, by the way? Last year was pretty bad, right?
So far, I can get on Twitter, and Foursquare is working great. I met the Foursquare guys in the lobby of the hotel, and they were all smiles, so things are going well.
Yeah, what's the Foursquare?
You know, this location thing where you check in at the bars and then everybody gets to stalk you?
Yeah, I think it's overrated. So let's start with, we've been wanting to do this show with Brett and Chris for about a month now, ever since the announcements around Google Buzz, but most of the evangelists were quarantined until just I think this week, when we started to see some people came out. Last week, DeWitt Clinton gave a talk that we sort of covered, that Kevin Marks also spoke at. So, you know, I guess the lid's coming off of some of the concerns around privacy have sort of receded to some extent, and we're getting down to the real task, which is, as Robert Scoble has been expressing, is fixing the damn thing so that we can roll it out there. I see Brett shaking his head again. All right.
I'm not shaking it. I think it's a funny way to put it. That's all.
Well, of course it's a funny way to put it. That's the whole point of this thing. Okay. So, you know, I'll shut up now, and you tell me, Brett, what's going on here, and you know, is this all good? Are we moving toward you know, the evolution of some of these standards that all you guys have been working on for so much time?
Yeah. So it's been a really nice few weeks here, seeing people really start coming on board with a lot of the things that we've been talking about and working on for a long time. That includes everything from some of the microformats for declaring relationships between people, to stuff like PubSub, to feed formats and activity streams. And now people are talking more seriously about GeoRSS integration. So just the last month, the amount of, you know, the volume of email on all these different mailing lists is, I think, doubled or tripled, showing a lot more interest from developers. Every few days we get some more feedback, someone wrote some code, and so on. So from the standpoint of people doing integrations with Buzz or Buzz-like decentralized social networks, the interest is really starting to peak, which is great.
And Chris, you want to say the same thing again?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the nice things is just that Google finally has some skin in the game that seems a little more relevant and meaningful to people out in the valley a little bit. So that's been interesting, I guess, to see the response, especially now that I've joined Google, and to see people on the inside really trying hard to figure out how to improve what they've got, and how to pull in all that feedback and use it, I guess, constructively.
So I don't want to make too much of it, of the issue about you guys not really being comfortable, or that the powers that be weren't comfortable with you guys talking for the past few weeks, but I do want to address it because I think people, they saw over the past few months. I mean, Brett, you've been there at Google for how long?
Over 4 years.
So you're sort of like the grand old man on this team, but there are a lot of people who've, like Chris and Joe Smar and people like that, who've come on recently, and all of a sudden there was this question about whether or not the things that you'd done that had brought you to the party, in effect, were you were going to become like Jonathan Schwartz and go from being really hip and aggressive to talking about how you can't say anything because they're forward-looking statements. So, what's the feeling like inside Google, as far as you can tell? Is the heat off now? Are we going to move forward here, or is there going to be a certain amount of pullback in terms of the transparency that you guys have been working on for so long?
If I were to answer that, I think the way that I would address that is to first understand that there are a good number of people working on Buzz and related products and technologies, and so when the product came out, I think that it was fair to give the product team an opportunity to go in and actually address the concerns that people had before trying to do a full court sort of evangelism push. I mean, that's, I don't think, what Brett or I were interested in really doing. And we've really wanted, I think, to make the case for a lot of the technologies that are underlying Buzz and what the Buzz technology stack means, I think, for the social web in general. But there was a lot of things that had to come first, that had to be fixed and improved, and I think the Buzz team did a really good job actually listening to the feedback and responding to it. And now that stuff, I think, has kind of been worked on a bit, there's an opportunity now for us actually, I think, to get back to talking about technology. So it was really, I think, just a matter of prioritization of the conversations that needed to happen in the proper order. And so that's why I think we're really excited to finally have the chance to get in and talk about these things.
Well, what do you think are the top three things that needed to be dealt with in the aftermath of the release?
I think those are things that the product team would probably be better suited to discuss. And I think it was a real trial by fire. I think this is the first time that Google had sort of put something out there and seen this kind of response, and they took the feedback as best as any team could, and I think that they were, overall quite transparent, and they communicated what they were going to do, and then they did it, and then they followed up with, kind of a summary of what changes they had made. So I think it's all kind of there on the blogs and on the Buzz team Buzz feed, and I think DeWitt has actually been doing a really good job communicating as well. So, I'd personally not rather, rehash those pieces because I think it's all been covered.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that what DeWitt's been doing on Buzz is probably the most interesting, if not the only interesting stuff that's on Buzz right now. But that's just because, you got very noisy people like Scoble that have broken the whole apparatus. So, Robert, what you say you've been talking to Google people about what's going on in terms of, pushing comments to the top, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think is happening there, or what have you been told about what's going to be improved about that?
Well, they've already improved it quite a bit from the first day. They've checked in a bug fix called the Scoble bug, the Scoble bug fix, which will keep my items from popping up every time somebody engages on those items, because some of my items have gotten hundreds of comments and dozens, if not hundreds, of likes, and each one of those things keeps popping that up to the top of everybody's feed. And if that happens on 3 or 4 items, all you see is my items, and you don't see your real friends' items. And so they've made it so it only pops up once every 20 times or something like that. They also said I was at the Google event the other night, and they told me that they were doing several other bug fixes that the community has asked for, and also feature improvements. And they said those will roll out over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. A little batch at a time. And so they said to watch over the next month or two, and then you'll see some dramatic improvements.
What about your favorite Twitter feature, lists? And remind me what that actually does.
Yeah, they know they need to do that. They haven't given me a timetable on when they'll do specific features, unfortunately.
So there's no way to filter.
They have a list you can send to rather than a list you can receive from. So there's some stuff that would be a good thing to chat to Chris about, maybe. Okay,
let's chatter with Chris about that right now.
I guess,
and you're using a Salesforce copyrighted term.
Robert's issue. It's actually a problem that people who are following me on Buzz are experiencing greatly. I mean, my girlfriend Bryn is having a problem with this. My mom is having a problem with this. Anything that I post on Buzz basically takes over their stream because they're following a small number of people, including me. So I think this is something that we're definitely aware of, working on, and it's a real hard problem, I think, to tackle. And because of the way that Buzz is going about trying to bring more relevance to the stream, it's going to be kind of messy at first. And I think there's a lot of experimentation that needs to happen to fix that.
Chris, there's a real simple fix. Give me a strict reverse chronological flow, just like Twitter, just like other places. Let me turn that on and see just the latest stuff that's coming into the feed.
So I think what I'm really eager about and what I want to see happen is for there to be a number of Buzz apps and clients that get built that actually can address that direct need. I think while there's going to be absolutely product improvements made to Buzz itself that get pushed out to all Gmail and Buzz users, I'm really excited. I think this is what Brett can also speak to, the technologies that we're going to roll out in terms of making this stuff available for other people to build perhaps better or more appropriate interfaces and interactions for the Buzz stream. And so people like me or people like Robert can actually use this stuff.
Chris, 90% of the people, at least at first, are going to use the Buzz website because of the Gmail integration. I'm not very likely to use Buzz in a client because of that integration. That's why I'm using Buzz, is because it's right next to my Gmail icon, and I see, oh, some stuff came in, and I'm going to click over there and check it out. And I think that's what's driving a lot of the usage. That's the only reason we're using it, right? If a startup had developed Buzz and tried to release it, we would have all ignored it. We're using it because it's Google, and it's right next to that Gmail icon.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that. I think in terms of the actual product roadmap stuff, again, that's stuff that either Brett or Brian Stoll and Brian Jackson, folks who are on the product team, can speak to more directly.
Okay, Brett.
So,
well, I mean, the only thing I'd add here is I just think that this highlights the kind of tension between power users and kind of normals, as people call them. And I think that I've made a point of actually not subscribing to anyone's BuzzFeed that I know generates a lot of online content, and I don't have any of these problems.
So in other words, you don't subscribe to normals, as you call
But
them.
what you're saying there is Buzz doesn't scale.
What was that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So what you're saying there is Buzz doesn't scale to a large number of users. One of the reasons Twitter works is because of the following model, and because I don't have to see every reply to the famous person that I follow. I can follow a famous person without it destroying my feed. I can follow him, even though every time you ask a question, he gets 200 responses.
Not only that, but you can have a list of famous people that's separate from your family and separate from your coworkers.
Yeah, but that's a power thing. More the basic thing. With Twitter, I only see this stuff directly from people who follow, when people address me directly. If Robert posts something and 200 people comment on that by replying to him on Twitter, I don't see that.
Yeah, let me be clear. I think there's a little confusion about what I said. So what I was saying was that I've been following people that are not famous people. I've been following people that have slow publishing rates, so that my actual overall rate has been very slow. So I have a lot of people that I'm following, but they're people that don't have a high publishing rate. So they're more normal in that sense. And so that is a good fit for the UI as is. And I, like Chris, I agree with a lot of the things that you're pointing out, and I know that the product team is aware of all these things, and I'm confident that they're making adjustments to it.
You're basically making a normal distribution assumption rather than a power law distribution assumption. That's the problem. When you've actually got with all these systems is a power law distribution, which means there are some users who have enormously more traffic than others. And if you pretend they don't exist, you're going to cut off that end of
I agree.
Way, even if
you can't pretend they don't exist.
One at a time, Robert. Let Brett finish. Thanks.
No, I was just going to say that, no, you're right that there's a lot of critical mass around these power users who generate the vast majority of the content that people actually interact with. That's really true. But then again, Buzz started off with your chat contacts, and I don't have Robert Scoble in my chat contacts. So I think that there is a difference there. And we need to fix it.
What you're ignoring, though...
But it doesn't matter. If you have me in your chat contacts and I have Robert in mine, if I respond to anything from Robert, you get the whole flood.
Yeah.
There's a second-order chain effect which causes the problem.
There's a chain effect that's true, but also somebody on your... Even if you follow Z-listers, and that's all you interact with, one of them is going to get popular for some reason, and they're going to say something that outrages everybody, and that's going to overtake your feed for a while.
I appreciate the vote of confidence, Robert. My friends, I guess, aren't that interesting. I don't know. That hasn't happened so far. I haven't had that happen. But no, you guys are right. I mean, I agree with you that these exact problems need to be solved, specifically with high traffic, either posts or high traffic. But isn't this high production users?
Brett, isn't this a classic, issue? Let's not call it a problem. That's been ongoing since Twitter first started. I mean, that's why I wanted, Track to stay around from the beginning. Was that it gave me the ability to have, somewhat the best of both worlds. I could follow a small number of people, and at the same time have the serendipity of people who wanted to communicate with me, or with people that I was interested in following. Come into the discussion. So I mean, it's not like this was a big secret before the product shipped. So
and actually, Steve, I don't have the problem because I've done exactly the opposite of what Brett's done. I've followed everybody. I'm following 9,500 people, and nobody takes over my feed for very long, right? Yeah, so I've solved it the complete opposite way. At least this single problem, I don't have this problem.
Well, I mean, that's great as long as somebody pays you to sit there in front of your monitor.
This is the river of news problem, though. I mean, something that Dave Weiner never talked about with his river of news was that there's actually two rivers. There's the fast-moving river, and then there's the slow inner tube river where you just kind of sit around and hang out, right? And so maybe Scoble's subscribed to the raging waters, and I'm subscribed to the inner tubes, and that's kind of the difference between us.
The thing is about the fast raging river. There's a completely different problem that I'm seeing, which is noise. I really hate seeing tweets in my Google Buzz items. I don't want to use this as a Twitter client. Not yet, at least. It's not good enough to use as a Twitter client. So I'm already reading tweets. I read 18,000 Twitter folks on Tweety or somewhere else, and now I come over to Buzz and I see duplication because I see those same tweets duplicated, and everything.
That is because you're weird. I mean, most people don't use more than one client.
No, I'm not the only one, because hundreds of people have complained about this problem. They're seeing duplication because they're already over on Twitter. They've already followed all their friends there. Now they come over to Buzz and they're seeing the exact same tweets.
Well, there are multiple ways. There are multiple ways of dealing with this problem. My way of dealing with it is to basically spam them until they go away. And on a large scale, I think that's actually a fairly effective strategy. What we're talking about here is fundamentally not the extreme use cases on either end, but rather what's the sweet middle where people are, we're just seeing this stream philosophy dominating all software from here on out. It's fine for you to say, Robert, that you don't want to deal with this right now. That it's not ready as a Twitter client. How about we make design decisions which are going to provide you the opportunity to be able to use it as a Twitter client?
Well, Steve, for one feature request, friend feed lets me decide on whether I want
repeat that, Robert. I'm not hearing you. Go ahead, say it again.
What's that?
You're dropping out. Say it again, please.
Oh, sorry. On FriendFeed, we already have this fixed, so all they need to do is copy a couple of features from FriendFeed. One, I can say I don't want to see Kevin Mark's Flickr photos because I don't think his Flickr photos are very good. Or I could say, I don't like your puppy photos. Or I could say, don't show me Kevin Mark's tweets. Or I could say globally, I don't want to see any tweets at all. And that solves that problem for me purely. So
how does that solve it? Go ahead, Brett.
Well, I was just going to say that only solves it if you actually understand the difference between these things. And like my mom, if she's hopping on Buzz, she has absolutely no idea what the difference is between these things. She doesn't even see the link that says the original source is being Twitter or Picasso or Flickr. So, for her, she just wants it to work. And it's, like I said, this is the tension between power users and normals. And I think that we do need to solve these things for power users because they're actually going to be the vast majority of the usage. Totally agree. But for the mass appeal to actually make this useful for normal people, you do have to, like Steve was saying, you have to find the sweet spot where it just kind of automatically, with no configuration, kind of figures out the right thing. And maybe you say, instead of saying, like, I don't want to see Flickr photos, you say, I don't want to see stuff like this. and friend feed kind of gets there with some of what they're doing. That's really good. But I think that it's interesting to think of it less as like specific configuration feature requests, and more as like what can it automatically learn and what are the semantics of that. So I don't like this item, so please just automatically filter stuff like that out of my stream.
Okay, so I mean go ahead, Kevin.
The activity stream stuff that I know Chris is keen to talk about, which is trying to come up with a way of expressing this stuff in a uniform way that works between sites, so we can say this is a photo sharing activity, this is a short message activity, this is a long essay activity, so that you can more easily then say, I don't want any more things like this, because we're getting the same kind of signals, whether it's from Flickr or Facebook or Buzz or however you get the photos in there.
All right, so Chris, you've been doing this for quite a while. In fact, Kevin used to do it as well before he went off and did it somewhere else. What's in the context of an existing large product that is pushing some activity stream development? What do you see as the primary things that you're working on right now that you think are going to help solve this problem, or are you just trying to perpetuate adoption across a number of different vendors?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple pieces here that I'd like to add, and I appreciate Kevin bringing up the activity streams thing, because what he's bringing up and in terms of the photo example, that's exactly what the activity streams effort is kind of about solving. Before I talk about that, I just want to make one interesting point about Buzz, and that's that as opposed to Twitter, where, and Kevin points this out correctly, that, of course, you don't necessarily see the replies to other people's posts. Buzz kind of went in the opposite direction and allowed you to create kind of a conversational space that is anchored to an individual. And one of the early, I think, complaints about Twitter was that all these conversations were divergent. So now we've gone in the other direction and actually converged these conversations, and now it's too noisy. So we have kind of let's try everything eventually and see which things actually pan out. And I think Brett's kind of got the right idea that over time we're going to have systems and sort of social agents that work for us to attune these feeds so that they're more interesting to us, so that when we actually visit them, the people that we want to keep in touch with are in the stream, and those who maybe we're not as interested in or don't need to stay up to date with, kind of fade out and are a lesser signal.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you, but this reminds me of Slashdot comments, how there's a moderation level you have, and it says these people are below your moderation level, and you don't even see the comments. That you can apply that model to the conversational space really well.
Yeah, the problem I have
the same thing. So I think
that requires explicit moderation. Slashdot works because lots of people sit there and actually thumbs up and thumbs down.
I understand that, but there are other ways to derive those quality signals. That's all I'm trying to talk about.
Yeah, but the problem that I see is that if you've got a black box there in terms of no understanding of how the algorithm's working, that people won't trust it. They may trust it because they have to, but I don't think that that's going to spur widespread adoption.
This is probably what Chris was getting to next, I think, what he was going to say.
You want a choice of black boxes. That's the thing, and you can only do that if you can move the stream from one place to another. I mean, that's something that Twitter has done nicely, made it possible for us to have multiple views onto the same stream by releasing a good API. And there's I'm going to a Twitter developers meetup next with 140 and Laura and the gang, because there's enough for them here to actually get together and talk about that. Hopefully we can do that same kind of thing once we've got an open standard around this. That means that we're not just relying on a single source of updates.
Chris, you were going to say
something?
Well,
I think, yeah, so eventually I'd like to see competition more in those filtering agents, I guess, so that you're able to bring your feeds or your streams from one place to another, try out different flavors of things. I mean, as it is, I think it's important to just recognize that Facebook is already doing this for most people. I mean, Facebook has their own algorithms for determining, what's going to show up in your newsfeed and how it's going to be prioritized, and if someone comments, are you going to see it, and how does that work? And so they've been at this a while, and I think that there should be many parties that are doing something similar. I mean, right now,
but Facebook hasn't figured out how to be able to have a conversation. I mean, they bought FriendFeed, but they haven't deployed it. So, I mean,
yeah, they do. What are you talking about, Steve?
The Facebook stream is conversation. That's what I see.
It's somewhat conversational. In the past month, it's gotten a little bit more conversational, but it's still a dead end. It doesn't. The comments to somebody's tweet that filters over to Facebook and then isn't this what the salmon thing is all about? Is trying to see if you can roll that up, Chris?
But we're going to see that. We're going to see that everywhere. So, Foursquare just launched a new version of their iPhone app, and now one of the primary actions is actually shouting, which is probably no longer called shouting because it doesn't make as much sense in that context. But if all of these apps that allow you to post some sort of status update or some small message that'll get out to your friends has this problem where the conversations are happening in all these different places, then if one of your friends chooses to consume this stuff on Buzz, another chooses to use Facebook, another chooses to use Foursquare, another chooses Gowalla, whatever it's going to be, I think that ultimately people should be able to use the tools that are most friendly to them, that they prefer, and the technology kind of works to make it easier to facilitate that type of interoperability. So to answer your question, the combination of activity streams, which represents what types of things are going on, who's doing what to which objects, and how to send messages back to the source when someone comments on something that's flown downstream, down the river, is kind of the architecture that needs to happen next, and that's what we're really pushing for, I think, with Buzz. So as DeWitt has said many times, and I think matches with where I would like to see this go, and I think Brett wants to see this go, is that Buzz becomes another node on the social web, not the only social node on the web, and that people can pick and choose amongst the best tools that work for them. So, like I said, I mean, this might not be a great solution for Robert today because he wants to be in Gmail and accessing the Buzz stream, but if there is a competitive experience that really, really works well for like super A-listers, then either he should be able to substitute that experience, in his Buzz, for his Buzz flow, or use something alternative. And that's how this stuff should play out. I think that there should be a lot of competition in the space, and the way that you do that is by cranking up the metadata and making it possible to actually cross-syndicate between different outposts. So I think that's where stuff needs to go.
And the subtlety there is, it's basically encouraging competition. That's the thing that's weird about saying that is you're like, hey, may the best man win for their group of people that are interested in it. It's not like, oh, let's get more and more users actually using the Buzz client in Gmail. There's an inherent part of what you said, Chris, that is saying that there will be many players in this game with the same metadata, with the same feeds, doing different things with it, providing different value for different users. And the claim is that should just work. There shouldn't be any barriers to prevent that from working.
Yeah,
it's interesting because you guys already have two web clients. One's on the iPhone and one's on the web page, like in Google Chrome on my desktop. The iPhone actually works better than the Google Chrome for a high flow user like me because it only shows me a small number of items, and then I have to refresh the page to see more items. There's too many items being flown into Google Chrome, and the page just almost locks up. It's really hard to even scroll up and down my page on the desktop version.
Yeah, I've never seen.
Should have options to limit the number of options.
I'm not using Chrome. I'm using Firefox, but I've never seen beyond the first page of Buzz. I click the thing at the bottom. It says loading, and it just goes into a loop.
Too, that the conversational nature of Buzz requires a slightly different approach to the social interaction design, and it's something that is, I think, very experimental right now. And clearly, as Robert's pointing out, we haven't figured it out. There's a lot of great behavioral information, I think, in cues that we're able to look at and see, but what works for Robert is not going to work for my mom, is not going to work for me, is not going to work for a bunch of people. And so I'm hoping that by opening up...
I just don't buy that. I mean, FriendFeed figured out all this stuff about a year and a half ago. I do. So. I think that they figured it out quite well. I mean, why did Facebook buy the thing for $50 million if they didn't figure out something?
It was for the guys. They're awesome. I mean, they're really
right. And those guys. Awesome guys and a bunch of other awesome guys. Hang on, Robert. Hang on. Okay. I can't hear you, Robert, because I've got you muted.
Are already seeing duplication because of how you're bringing items in, and they don't like it. They resist it, and then they tell me this sucks. I'm not going to use this. I'm going to go back over to Facebook.
I don't know what you just said, but what I was trying to say was that the interaction model of real-time messaging was built out on FriendFeed over a period of about 6 months, and they did a lot of experimenting. The great minds that were bought by Facebook, and some that weren't, like Gary Bird, basically figured out what it took to be able to find a happy medium for this. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody wants to have this interaction model, but for those people who do, this so far has been the most sophisticated version of something which started with IRC and has gone through a number of iterations. So all I'm saying to you is that when you try and figure out this happy medium to account for a broad audience, you may not be solving anybody's problem at both ends of the spectrum.
I think the dangerous. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say that could be true. I think if you were to just take FriendFeed as it exists today and dump it into Gmail, I think a lot of the criticisms that you're leveraging today would find their way onto some other feature or some other design element. I don't think that there's a clear one-to-one mapping between these things, and you have to actually really consider the context and the space in which you're designing. So if you were to take FriendFeed or the Facebook news feed or Jaiku or IRC and just dump it into Gmail, I think that you'd have a similarly jarring experience. So the question kind of needs to be around, well, how can we facilitate people consuming this kind of information and actually participating in a way that works for them, that I think first facilitates just a more conversational web? And I wouldn't say that Buzz has actually figured that out yet. I think that, sort of to your point, there are these two extremes, one where people want to have this huge amount of information, and on the other hand, there are people who maybe check into Buzz once a week. And in order to give them a really good experience, you've got to optimize things in a slightly different way. So I think when it comes to Buzz, Google wants to do a lot of the heavy lifting for people, but finding the right balance between different roles that people take on is a huge challenge. And the one last thing that I'd point out about Robert's point about duplicates being seen in Buzz as well as on Twitter and things like that is this is something that I've been working on for a while in terms of internet identity and online identity. And the problem really resides in the fact that there isn't a way of indicating really to the web in a way that's consistently supported yet that you have a consistent persona online, and that this is sort of like the source of truth. So if I want to publish out a status update and have it go to all the different channels that I maintain, that's the way that it should be, and people should be able to subscribe to that wherever they want to.
It exists, Chris, but it doesn't. So it exists in the sense that the Atom source element exists, which provides some level of provenance for the original location of the published feed. The problem is
from a technical perspective.
Yeah, I'm saying it exists, but nobody actually honors it, and that's the real problem. That it needs to be honored, and Buzz is starting to honor it. But then that's solve the identity problem, which is the second part that you're getting at, because you see the feed syndicated and you don't even realize it's the same person, right?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, so one of the things that's striking about Buzz is effectively it's reinventing blogging, and the Atom source stuff is honored by the sort of classic feed readers that are assuming there's a blog at the other end of it. The issue is when you feed it through some other channel that doesn't actually generate a sort of full-featured Atom feed, like say Twitter, you're losing all that information. So you basically have to regenerate it. So if you look at something like ClickSet, what they do is they take the JSON version of Twitter and use that to generate a more Atom-like thing that can fit into the rest of the world. So they're basically patching over Twitter's lack of implementation of full Atom. So there's a possibility of doing that, but it's a whole bunch of extra work, and trying to actually propagate the IDs around. When one of the channels is so narrow is a big problem.
Right. Yep.
You mentioned Atom. Dave Weiner's been criticizing Google quite vociferously for failing to support RSS and RSS Cloud. I know that you, Brett, have in the past, when PubSub was first becoming more visible at the first real-time conference, you said things that indicated that there would be support coming, or that you were certainly in favor of it at some point. But there are other people who seem to, basically want to just ignore it, or even worse. What's your take now? And I'm not hearing you right now.
Yeah, sorry. So I think that what I probably said, I don't remember exactly what I said back then. I don't remember saying that it's something we should definitely support. What I said, I would imagine what I said was that it's something we should definitely think about seriously. And it depended on how it caught on and who preferred it and if developers preferred it. And with WordPress.com now supporting PubSub in addition to RSS Cloud, and Google Reader and NetVibes and ClickSet and FriendFeed and Buzz all getting updates from WordPress in real time now through PubSub, we kind of have a lot more momentum behind Hubbub at this point. And I was actually really pleased with Dave's initial post to his blog about WordPress.com supporting PubSub. I thought that he was actually saying that he really liked that this happened, and he was very positive about it. So I think that some of the patent stuff kind of muddled the waters a bit, but overall, I think Dave's, I can't speak for Dave, but I got the impression that he's actually happy with how things are going. He just wants to make sure that if we're going to go this route, that everyone's protected from kind of patents and all the other kind of hidden minefields that could possibly be there. And so the hope is, and something that DeWitt Clinton's been fighting for a lot, is the Open Web Foundation licenses and kind of some patent protections in there to make sure that people realize that things like PubSub, Hubbub, and Salmon and activity streams have patent guards basically in them that says, like, this is yours, worldwide, non-revocable, no patents, go for it. And I think, Joe Gregorio's talked about this a little bit too, and, we're trying to emphasize to people that really, these are out there for everyone to take and go and run with, so you don't have to worry about it. And I think that once we kind of allay some of Dave's fears in that regard, I hope that he'll be, even more receptive and more positive about supporting PubSub Hubbub more directly.
Well, let me ask it a different way then. What is it technically, in your opinion, too difficult to implement it, and why not take the time to do it just to take it off the table as an argument?
So yeah, that's the argument that I hear, and I hear that from internal people at Google too. So we have advocates, in the organization that have follow the same exact logic. Right now, it's more of a question of planning for the scale and size of the web. So the inherent problem with RSS Cloud is its scalability and its latency. It has some security issues too, which have been mostly worked around. So I'm just going to focus on scalability and latency. The Thundering Herd problem is still a problem with their spec. And Dave's kind of acknowledged this by putting fat pings in the cloud pipe part of RSS Cloud. And then if you just work out on paper the latency differences between RSS Cloud and PubSub Hubbub, you realize that RSS Cloud can never be any better than 3 times slower. So for real-time,
right? But I mean, if it's 3 times slower, then people won't use it, and then we can move on from this political argument, which seems to be. I mean, somebody said at the beginning of this show something about how this is an issue of identity and trust of identity. They said it in the context of something else, but isn't it important to when it's possible to do so with a minimum of diverted resources, to be able to essentially say, it's not that we're opposed to this for any personal or political reason. It's that we don't think it works as well, so we'll implement it. And if people want to use it, and then they like being 3 seconds to 3 days late, then they should be happy with it.
Yeah, let me clarify though. I don't think any of it's for personal reasons whatsoever. I think
I'm saying that it's not, but some of the invective coming from certain people, including Dave, can be extremely negative, and I think it's damaging to the overall feeling. I don't agree with the idea that somehow. I don't agree with the idea that somehow Google has bad intentions. I think that they have just the same kinds of intentions that any large player in the space does, and that includes Microsoft, it includes Cisco. I mean, we could talk about where is Cisco coming from, since they have control of these packets at the lowest layer of the network stack. I mean, we can all create black helicopter scenarios and assign malintention to people's desire to try and build some reach in terms of their technologies.
Well, Steve, I've got an easy answer for you. I think the problem is that the subtleties of the latency and scalability issues are lost on most people, and most people think of these things as equivalent. And the danger is that if we think of these things as equivalent, then we will just go forward with whatever we feel like or whatever our friends have told us, and it's going to lay the wrong foundation for the future when it actually starts to matter. And so what I worry about is if we say, oh yes, PubSub, HubHub, and RSS Cloud are exactly the same, use any one you want, we will consume both. It's like, well, that's true up to a point when you actually want to start doing things in a certain way. So a good example of this is if you want to do character by character synchronized typing like a wave, you can't do that with the kind of latency that RSS Cloud can provide for you. You just can't. And so, like, we want people to build on top of infrastructure that allows for actual real-time interaction with the lowest possible latency, so that we're ready. So that we're ready for this in the future when we want to make even cooler, newer stuff.
Kevin, you have a comment?
So I think Dave is asking the right question about patents. Absolutely, he's asking in a slightly obnoxious way about Google.
Can you lean into the microphone? You're very, very quiet.
Sorry, I'll get closer. Is that
That's better? Yeah.
Pick it up. So Dave is asking the right question about patents. He's asking the slightly obnoxious way about Google, but the question is correct. We need to be careful that we don't implement something and then someone comes up with a submarine patent and sideswipes it later. And this has been a huge problem in the industry. We've had it in the video world, we've had it in the browser world with some of the plugin patents and things like that. So what the answer to that is for the people setting the spec up to sign the Open Web Foundation agreement, which says I will give you a license for any patents that I have that require to implement this spec. And that discussion has been going on between Google, people from Google, from Microsoft, from Facebook, me from BT, others across the industry, trying to come up with an agreement that we can all sign that will actually mean that the standards have this data on around them. So far as Dave is asking the right question, we do have an answer for that, which is this OWF agreement, and that's the model we're trying to work to going forward.
Okay, so if people aren't going to understand the vagaries of these rather complex technical questions, are they going to understand what ODF is either?
OWF?
I'm sorry.
OWF. ODF is
that would be my point. Chris?
So the Open Web Foundation Agreement is basically a straightforward patent disclaimer that says, insofar as I have any patents that relate to this spec, you have a license to implement. So if someone has a patent on feeds or has a patent on comments or whatever, or labeling photographs or whatever, because there are a bunch of stupid patents granted out there, at least the organizations that have signed up to implement that will give you a license. It doesn't stop some third party coming along digging a patent out of a dead company and suing everyone. But it does at least allay the fears that Dave was expressing about big companies patenting something and then using it as a time bomb later on.
Right. Chris,
the way that Apple has recently every time.
Chris, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kevin's done a pretty good job, I think, of explaining the purpose of the Open Web Foundation and the sticky situation that we find ourselves in. I mean, before I joined Google, a lot of the work that I had done, on activity streams and OpenID and other projects like that, were sort of done on the assumption that you could give things away. And as it turns out, it's a lot harder to give things away than you might expect. And so we're now, and I think every project that's going to try to build out the social web with new technologies and formats and protocols, needs like an ownership model and how patents make that work and the ability for people to actually implement that work later on. The Open Web Foundation was specifically started as a sort of low-cost mechanism for community-generated technologies to be used by people in a way that allowed large companies as well as small companies and individuals to make use of these things and have some confidence that they could do so legally. In a sense, it's sort of like a Creative Commons for software. And I think it's really important. It actually, in many ways, I think does address the concerns that Dave has brought up so far. The Activity Streams project, for example, is going to be using the Open Web Foundation's licensing agreements. I believe Salmon is already going in that direction. OAuth is going to be using that. So there are a number of these technologies that are all really important, I think, to the future of an interoperable social web that people can feel comfortable implementing, or at least that's the hope and desire and design.
What's your take on the discussion that Jesse Stay had with DeWitt Clinton about, why don't we just use the Facebook APIs and be done with it?
I think that there's I'll put it this way. I understand where Jesse's coming from and the desire that he has to make use of technology that he's already familiar with, has already worked with, and has implemented. I think that a lot of people are sort of like, why do we need another technology to do this stuff? But when it comes down to it, when you're actually talking about big companies supporting these things, which is really what you need to do, or what you need to have in the marketplace to get to scale and to motivate people from an economic perspective to actually support these technologies, the lack of clarity around the licensing for the Facebook Connect platform and APIs, as well as, for example, the Twitter Connect APIs.
I have to interrupt you. I have to interrupt you because go to Scoble. Is that Leo Laporte walking around behind you?
Yeah. No, we got Leo Laporte here. Is this the tour to guitar?
Hello. I haven't seen you in quite some time, Leo.
Guitar here. Where's the tour to guitar?
Leo, what are you doing these days? I haven't seen you in quite a while.
I haven't been able to find work. I don't know. I was hoping maybe you could offer me something.
Same terms as last time?
I believe that was no money at all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
this is this incredible studio they've built here. It's really quite dramatic.
There's a webcam on a bunch of boxes.
Yeah, it's very technical.
And it's actually in a beer closet, I think.
Yeah.
okay, so I don't want to take too much time here, but Leo, what do you think is going to happen down there at South by Southwest?
Mostly a lot of geeks are going to get very drunk.
Right.
The funny thing is it's almost all people from the Bay Area. It's like they come to Austin to get drunk.
By the way,
So it's going to be this week in alcohol, basically.
This is the augmented Scoble.
yeah.
Look, I got a.
Scavenger game.
They're putting augmented stuff on.
You're
my
supposed
shirt.
to get that as a tattoo, then it really works.
I have my Foursquare tattoo. See.
It's a bunch of nerds down here, Steve. It's really kind of sad, actually. We're all very lonely. You know what's interesting about South by is there are a lot of attractive women here. I've never been to a geek conference where there were women, as many
You're
women.
not supposed to tell me
Oh,
the wives won't let us come if you let that out.
Oh, the wives.
Yeah, that's a real big secret.
You see Steve's
My
out
wife
there.
is a huge Gillmor Gang fan, so
Yeah.
she watches every week.
Well, when she can,
I
right?
really like that client that you did, Steve. I think that's pretty far out.
Which one? Oh, I noticed that you're in the app.
Yeah, the news client. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, when the friend feed API works.
You can move it to activity streams.
Yeah.
No, it's just there. I think they're moving servers, so it'll be good news eventually. All right, well, Leo, it's good to see you, and see you again soon.
So, Steve, I got.
Okay, I think I heard what you were going to say, which is that you have to go. All right, let me take a few more minutes with our Google guests, and Kevin, you can stick around. Thanks, Robert. I interrupted you in midstream, Chris, so please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I have no idea what I was talking about. Something, as you said, nerdy and geeky.
You're talking about implementing the Facebook API and the problems of that.
Actually, that is kind of interesting. So yeah, I mean, in the same way that we could go and implement RSS Cloud and other technologies like that. I mean, there's dozens and dozens that I'm sure people would love to see everyone else implement. In particular with Jesse's comments about the Facebook Connect stuff. First of all, again, it's what is the license for other companies to make use of the Facebook Connect APIs to connect to non-Facebook data, and does Facebook actually have a desire or interest in pushing that through the Open Web Foundation so that other people can create Facebook Connect-like APIs that, let's say, compete with the Facebook APIs? It's unclear, and even if they went in that direction and they said, hey, we want everyone to sort of make their own Facebook Connect API. This Facebook's sort of at a point of maturity where they're kind of ready to open it up to a community process of development and creation and governance and things like that. And I think those are questions that Jesse also needs to consider when suggesting that other companies, no matter who they are, I mean, you could make the same request of Twitter, goes to implement some other companies' IP.
I've got the opposite example too. So one of my favorite examples of this is the Google Reader unofficial API. So if you ever look at a Google Reader shared items feed, it's got all this extra craziness in it of Google Reader namespace elements in the XML that indicate likes and comments and all this other kind of metadata about the feed. And it's not documented, and people are not encouraged to ever even touch it. And technically, the copyrights on those namespace elements are very similar to the copyrights that Facebook may have on some of their kind of proprietary APIs. And so what we've decided in this case is, hey, you know what, we're going to standardize on activity streams because this is a way that's going to work for everybody. And the most important thing is that we won't deprecate anything. In the reader feed, we can deprecate any namespace element at any time for whatever reason because it's just our proprietary thing. It's about flexibility for us as a service provider. And I think that what's really important to highlight is that Facebook probably wants to have the exact same kind of flexibility in what they're providing to the developers and the same flexibility in what they want to do with deprecation and lifecycle of their APIs. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that Jesse was also missing is that, you know, just because you can implement an API doesn't mean that API is actually going to last forever. And Facebook's API has constantly changed for the better over time in a way that has not allowed the old versions of the API to continue working. So I expect that to continue. And I expect that to change even more as location-based services become more relevant. So, you know, we could do that, but if we're going to do that, if we're going to implement an API owned by Facebook or another company, if anyone's going to implement that API, they need to think about the deprecation policy. And that goes hand in hand with the licensing.
Yep.
I mean, the other thing that goes along with that is that it's easier to standardize on someone else's API once that thing has actually been frozen. If you look at the way RSS and Atom have been standardized, they basically froze the spec at some point and said, we're done here, there's some extension mechanism with namespaces, which is what Activity Streams is using, but you can't add or remove any core elements anymore. And you need to have a fair degree of maturity and interoperating implementations before you can do that. And if you actually look at these community standards processes that we're all involved in here, what it tends to involve is finding several people who have implemented something very similar, finding the common elements and writing those down, and either omitting or leaving as extensions the bits that are specific to one company. And what that, this is my sort of suit versus a t-shirt mental model, which is if I'm writing a custom client for every single one, it's like being a tailor who has to make a bespoke suit for everyone he visits. Whereas if you make t-shirts, you make 3 sizes, they'll fit everyone. So that's the sort of difference between the two API models. So you know, Facebook's APIs is a great sort of bespoke suit, but that fits Facebook really, really well, but it wouldn't necessarily fit Twitter very well. It won't fit Buzz as well, and so on. What we're trying to do with this sort of long, you know, Activity Streams has been going on for about 2 years now, where we've been just discussing this stuff and trying to say, well, this thing is like that thing, let's call it this. And that's a lot of, you know, it's back and forth conversation and consensus building, and it takes a while. And yeah, you can't turn that around as quickly as a proprietary API. But the point is, you're able to move stuff from one place to the other, and people can build things that go back and forth.
And there's room for both. I mean, I don't actually want to see the Facebook API slow down in terms of the features they add, because they're blazing new, you know, like they're blazing the trail. They're finding all the new cool stuff they want to add. And they need to keep doing that. They should keep executing and iterating in a way that is leading the industry, and that's great. And if we told them, okay, you need to standardize everything in your API and have it ratified every time you want to push it, it's just like, you know, it's not going to work out very well. So you need to allow for people to kind of be proprietary to some degree to allow for innovation, but hopefully come back and standardize things in a common way so that you can get the interop you want over time.
So we've talked a little bit about velocity here, about the ability to be able to engender change while at the same time, you know, be respectful of what brought you to the party. You guys, as sort of more visible, you know, working in the open standards arena, it seems like at least maybe just in the initial rush after Buzz was released, that you were put forward or were putting yourselves forward as sort of the touch points for people to be able to, you know, try and request feature changes or ideas about expanding the architecture. but it seems like the reality is that either we sort of batten down the hatches for a long period of sort of bubble up standards evolution, or well, I'll let Brett, since you're shaking your head, let's go with that.
Well, I don't think we have to wait for all the things that that Chris is talking about.
I mean, like I know what Chris is talking about, but the advantage of the situation with FriendFeed several years ago is that there were 2 or 3 people, Brett Taylor and Paul Buchheit and Gary Bird and a few others that you could literally talk to and say, this is really something that's important. Are you going to do this? And we would discuss things like, I mean, there's one thing that's sort of outstanding right now that in conversations with Paul, it's still potentially, and I underline potentially, in the roadmap, which is something called what I call stream splicing, which is starting to come up. But there was a David Galertner article recently in the New York Times or somewhere that suggested something similar to that. The idea of being able to take a track stream and various other kinds of what Scoble might call lists or views into these things, and then be able to mix them or multiplex them together to come up with something which is more useful, which you could then output to to the iPhone or to Android and have a really powerful architecture. How do we talk to you guys in such a way that we can get some kind of feedback loop going here? It just seems like it's not, maybe it's too early. Maybe it's just you haven't figured out yet how to be able to make that work.
I mean, you've talked to DeWitt, though, and you've talked to, I mean, if you look at, the Buzz team has their own Buzz user that you can follow and you can comment on their stream.
Right, but it goes in and you don't know whether or if it'll come back out.
Well, I think that what I would highlight here is just the sense of scale. They've got millions and millions and millions of Gmail users, and when they roll out a single Buzz feature, when they roll it out, they need to make sure that it works perfectly for everybody, and they never have to take the feature back. They don't want the kind of track scenario where the service gets big enough and then they turn it off and it never comes back, right? So that's one of the difficulties of a large product like Gmail and Buzz, is because you have so many users for every feature from day one. There's a little bit of a longer iteration cycle to ensure that the infrastructure is there. So that's part of it. And I think that plays into the reason they can't be so transparent about time schedules and when their things are going to be released and so on. But I do think everyone's listening. I mean, I know people are listening.
I might take this in a slightly different direction. And I think what Brett says is definitely accurate and important. And again, now that I work for Google, it's clear that scale is something that is literally a monumental consideration when launching different features. I mean, the fact that we've been able to use Buzz reliably since its inception, I think, is a testament to the type of planning that has to go on to make this stuff work for as many people as are going to be using it. That said, one of the things that I really hope is going to happen very soon is for the Buzz APIs to be able to give people access to a great deal of data and metadata in a form that goes above and beyond what we used to have before. I mean, the feeds that currently sites like FriendFeed and Buzz and Facebook consume are, in some ways, resource deficient. They're metadata deficient. What we want to be producing and encouraging in the marketplace is for people to be producing feeds that are much richer, so that we can actually see the ways that people actually want to be experiencing these types of streams. And I think that right now Buzz is really predicated on the notion of a conversational design model. And what I'd like to see more of is special types of interactions that are designed based on the types, based on groups of people. Types are, for example, if you're sharing photos, or for example, if you want to add a number of things to a wish list and you're building your wish list over a period of weeks, my feed aggregator should be able to go and bring that information together for me in a way that's very sensible, as opposed to showing me each and every single activity as it's happening. Because it's not true that every single thing that happens as it's happening is important or relevant at that moment, but over time may become more interesting.
Yeah, location's a good example of that too. Like if you have people checking in your stream all around the same area, then that should collapse into a single element of associated updates, right? It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, or being able to
that's
traverse the stream from a geographic, perspective.
Well, I mean that's very interesting. The question that I'm really asking though is who's the touch point? How do people understand? Forget about the overall system. How do they understand who they interact with as developers or as things, people like me who are trying to sort of encourage certain behaviors that I think will end up sticking to the wall. When we have this kind of abstract, amorphous, disciples, if you will, and I'm overdrawing this, but you got the 12 disciples, and where's Jesus and where's
Well, no, I think it's the other way around, Steve. The real problem is if there's only one implementer, there's only one source, then you have to do a business deal with them, and that actually is what slows you down. Whereas if there's an open protocol like SMTP, you don't have to worry about your mail client and the mail server actually having to do a business deal before they can interact. That's the key difference about doing with the open standards, is that you may have a bit more effort to discuss the technology, but you've got much less effort to discuss the business relationship. That is the sort of massive saving that we're seeing.
Yeah, but isn't that premature, the business relationship right now? What we're talking about is the...
No, that's what I'm saying. If you want to implement the Facebook API now...
I'm not selling Jesse Stay's idea. I think it's ridiculous that because they've got 400 million people, that somehow their API... I don't think their API works. I would wish that they, redid it and injected large amounts of friend feed into it. So...
The thing that's really wrong with Jesse's argument is that actually Facebook is already supporting activity streams output, but they're requiring auth to go into it. I mean, if you want a question for the Buzz team, it's like, why don't you support no auth feeds into Buzz? That would be nice.
Yeah, and the question for the Buzz team is, who's the Buzz team? That's what I'm asking you.
The Buzz team at Gmail or something? There's some Buzz
but
thing. You know who these guys are, and they're
help
around.
at bitbucket.com. I mean, come on, give me a break.
There's a bunch of them here at South by Southwest. There's a bunch of them who've been speaking publicly at user groups and
I agree.
Are on the mailing list,
and
the Buzz API mailing list.
Two of them are on the show right now, and DeWitt is another one. And we know who they are, but there's a certain, and I'm not trying to ascribe any kind of negative connotations to this. Believe me, there in other historical references, there's companies will sometimes set up a layer of people who are very engaged, who are the right people to talk to, and at a certain point they pass the buck and say that they can't really talk about that, that's below their pay grade or above their pay grade or whatever. What I'm trying to suggest to you is that there's these technologies are moving incredibly rapidly. I had lunch with Mark Benioff a couple of days ago, and he showed me the Chatter iPhone client, and I'm telling you, this thing rocks. These guys are at light speed. So, it's in your interests as a company, and it's in our interests as excited and aggressively, waiting for the iPad users to be able to understand where we're going to be able to interact. This is a very interactive network that's developing here, and there's a role for all of us in that subculture, and somebody needs to be able to identify where you and Chris and DeWitt are going to be able to, there's a gap between you, and then there's Bradley Horowitz, and then there's Vic Anotra. There's sort of a murky, mushy center here above the level of the guys that want to be able to spread across these open standards and the corporate goals and
Steve,
the integration with Gmail.
So we meet with Vic and we talk to Vic, and we meet with Bradley and we talk to Bradley, and what you're seeing is not a murky center of delicious nougat. It is actually delegation. So if you want to talk about the open web and kind of a lot of the things around identity that Chris has been championing for a long time, it's actually he's the guy to talk to. He's the one. That's the guy to talk to, and he's actually been delegated from on high to do that. And same thing with me and Brad Fitzpatrick, we were told by Larry and Sergey to go and make this happen.
Okay, great. So at the point that we start talking to you and we say, when are you going to release APIs that are going to allow us to be able to contour the stream so that we can move from this, grab bag from hell kind of approach to something which is as useful, albeit on fumes sometimes right now, friend feed. Friend feed's much more useful than Buzz. If we had the combination of the two, we'd be rocking. When's that going to happen? How do we get there? I
mean, I think it's going to happen real soon. I mean, Chris was talking about us working on APIs for addressing this stuff, and on day one when we launch Buzz, we have it's code Google.com API/Buzz. We talked about all the different pieces that are going to come into our Buzz API, including PubSub, HubHub, Salmon, Webfinger, etc. And so we're making those available. We turned Webfinger on for everybody. We're making forward progress on the rest of this. If you want to see a really good example of this in action, I think that ClickSet is probably the way to go. They consume the activity streams data. They do the right thing with it. They let you filter it in all these cool ways. They have a great client going for interacting with the kind of decentralized.
So you're sending me away from Buzz to another client?
Sure. I mean,
why? I don't understand
that's the point, though. I think the other group to look at is like StatusNet and what they've been doing with those status. We've been collaborating with those guys because they're using a lot of these technologies and they're really teasing out the use cases and the issues. So I think what Brett said about looking at ClickSet actually is pretty indicative of the way that we're actually thinking about these APIs and pointing the spotlight on people who are actually getting prepared and doing a lot of the stuff on their own volition because they see it as being beneficial to them because they can interop with a whole bunch of people, including Buzz, that will give you some indication of where we're going. I don't think that this is the kind of thing where, at least the way that we're talking about it internally and the way that we conceptualize it, as though it's one big thing that's going to change everything and it's going to be this whole new thing that you have to learn from scratch. A lot of it is making use, ideally, of information that you've already been gleaning from the stuff that we've been talking about for the last several years with regards to OpenID, OAuth, Webfinger, discovery protocols, activity streams, Atom, PubSub, HubHub. All the pieces are basically in a line. And one of the reasons why I was so excited, I think, to actually have this opportunity to come to Google is because we're getting to deploy this stuff at scale and finally demonstrate what we've been thinking about this whole time. So it's not going to be, I don't think, the kind of song and dance that you might expect around certain APIs, simply because it's like, oh, well, that seems kind of obvious. Well, I guess I could have been doing that the whole time. So I guess, in some ways, it's those little pockets of activity and groups that are already out there. The activity streams mailing list, there is the Buzz API mailing list, but I think you're going to have a lot more influence and ability to see what's really going on from those smaller groups, those pieces loosely joined, than trying to get one monolithic view. I think what Brett said about delegation is exactly right on.
I hear what you're saying, but just to be blunt about it, I'm going to get more leverage by talking to Benioff about what he's doing because he's got.
Maybe let
me express what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be confrontational here at all. What I'm saying is that the combination of market forces. I mean, you said this before, Brett. It's not a winner take all situation. It's not a this and not that. It's both, and the methodology of somebody coming at this problem or this opportunity from one angle, combined with what your guys are doing, that's going to have, I think, a much more aggressive impact than the problems that you guys have got. I think are that there's so many Indians, and historically, I don't think that it is as useful or as aggressively valuable to bet on these smaller groups of ad hoc people who are coming in when you can see right in front of you that there is an effort that's ongoing where you've got visible people that you can talk to, you guys, and you've got people like Sergey, who if you ask him a straight question he gives you a straight answer. You've got at the top and in the middle, you've got some people who are going to give you straight answers. The question is can you find a way in through the natural tendency of companies to want to keep product plans under wraps until a certain time, et cetera, et cetera. I think you have an opportunity with Buzz right now to be able to cut through the combination of market force and the open standards efforts that you're providing.
That's you're totally right, and I think that we're already basically saying that. I mean, we're working like with Darren Bounds from ClickSet on integrating with him with Salmon and all this other stuff right now, and you can actually just deduce our product plans from the features that are enabled. So how do comments come back, and how do you embed photos, and on, and it's like, okay, like you could actually build the roadmap of the product just looking at the functionality that's coming in there. And another example is John Panzer, who used to be tech lead of bloggers working on Salmon. Do you think that blogger comments are going to be able to go back into Buzz or back into Google Reader? These things are really kind of obvious if you think about the pieces fitting together. So, is there a Google product that does X? Is there a spec that does X? Chances are the plan is that we're going to kind of bring them together. I think that if you just apply that simple kind of obvious logic.
Okay, so we get that. The question then is, and one of the things that Kevin Marks did so well, we've lost him right now. I think that the alcohol has risen to
started flowing.
It's overwhelmed the bandwidth. Oh, here he comes again. One of the things that Kevin Marks has always done well, is particularly when he was at Google, was be able to sort of define and speak to people somewhere in between the complexity, geeky level that both of you get to sometimes, and the more abstract but also interesting to the user kind of things. And I don't know that, since Kevin's not there anymore, I don't know that you have somebody. I think you're closest to it, Brett, because of your, of PubSub, which sort of crosses over between the RSS phase and whatever we're in and moving toward now.
Well, Steve, I would tell you to talk to Chris and to Brad Fitz about the vision of decentralized social networks, and DeWitt too. I think that if you want to talk about user experience and the kind of ultimate experience that a user would have in this future world of standards, they're the guys to talk to, and they're the guys I get the inspiration from to work on all this protocol
Absolutely.
stuff.
That's why Chris is here right now. But what I'm asking is who do I talk to about pragmatic developer level API access that's going to allow people to be able to grow a third-party community the way that Twitter exploded around the Buzz environment, that's going to take into account the work that bluntly FrentFeed did for 2 years, and which will probably take a significant amount of time to bubble up at Facebook. That's the opportunity from an economic and marketing perspective as well. And I see other companies. I'll say it again. I see Salesforce. What they're doing is being ahead of you guys because they don't have this kind of swirling mass of competing entities that you're trying to normalize. I think it's fantastic, and I think that the boost that you're giving to the open standards groups, which is clearly why Chris and others have come over to Google, has been phenomenal and will have great impact in the future. The question is right now, are we going to just be hearing about how Scoble is too noisy for another 6 months, or is it going to be, are we going to see the kind of developer access to this thing that is emerging? I mean, people can say that people don't want conversations and that it's really a relatively small kind of environment, and that it doesn't speak to the large mass of users and the scale that you're operating at. But I want to know about that. I don't really want to know about the entertainment industry's follow architecture. I'm much more interested in these small, strategic, real-time conversations and interactions that are, ready to be exploited in the economy.
So I've got Chris, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand, the question that you're asking and what information you're trying to get, but I think Brett has actually answered it. And I think for now, at least, we're the guys, and that's just kind of how it is. And until the APIs come out that you're looking for,
all right, when are they going to come out?
So I think we would be really annoyed if we had to spend another 6 months sort of listening to Scoble complain about this stuff. Because we're having a lot of the same problems, or at least I am. So it would be, really frustrating if that didn't happen sooner than later. Obviously, we can't give you a specific date, but I think, we're working on the API
Well, this is what
stuff.
I used to do with Buchheit and Taylor. I would say,
sure.
Okay, longer than 6 months?
I certainly hope not.
Okay, longer than 3 months?
I would also hope not.
Longer than that, 2 months?
Beyond that, that's probably about as
so
close
somewhere
as
between 1 month and 3 months. You think somewhere between 1 and 3 months? Okay,
Largely 3 months.
That would be my aspiration.
Okay, and when we start to see that, is it going to be a bulk dump of an API, or is it going to be? Are there going to be parts of these APIs that are going to come first, and others
I
later?
think the way that it's going to come out is going to be in such a way that you can do something useful and interesting with it. I don't think that we would ship anything less than that, and I think that the idea is to start iterating pretty quickly once it goes out. But, like we've been saying, if you start taking a look at where Activity Streams is going, you're going to have a pretty clear picture of what's going to be part of that first-gen API and what we want people to be able to do with it. And if you're up on your OAuth specs and you're up on WebFinger and you're up on these other pieces, you'll be pretty well positioned by the time this stuff lands.
All right.
But the other thing is to keep in mind, Steve, like to really scratch your itch. If you really have an idea about the interaction from a user's point of view that you want to have in DISO 2, which is essentially what this is, I think you should seriously go to someone like Darren Bounds from.
We have an application called newsgang.net that we're running on top of the FriendFeed API. Beta.newsgang.net. Just download it. You're gonna. Unfortunately for you, you're gonna have to run Silverlight, but I think you can get over that. I know Chris won't get over it, but you might.
No?
All right.
That's a conversation for another time. But I'm just trying to tell you.
But here's my point: if you can provide APIs that do what the FriendFeed APIs do, or tell me where you're going to be at what time, that's going to be very useful information.
Totally. But I'm saying if you go and talk to someone like Darren Bounds at ClickSet, he'll actually help you with the API and the tools hooking up something like Salmon to the rest of this, and I think that he's in a much better position to iterate quickly and to really.
We'll have him on the show, and then when he passes the buck back up to you, then we'll have you both on.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
All right. Any final thoughts before?
To mention in the Salesforce context,
Sorry,
that was interesting. We haven't really covered this week. Was the Google launch this week of apps, the Enterprise App Store, and the stuff that they've plugged together there. I think that's another interesting example of opening up a whole bunch of hooks that people can develop against. And I'm hoping that as Google adopts further standards for activity and stuff, they'll show up in that world too.
Yeah.
So that may be the answer to Benny's thing.
There were some very interesting comments in the media. I was in the East Coast, so I didn't go, about basically being able to go through Gmail and get access to Gtalk and some of those primitives. That sounds very interesting. Is that touching what you guys are doing in any way?
I think there's a general desire to make a lot of these things, make sense, to be coherent. And it's, I think, a good sign that if you look at how the authentication stuff is done, it's all being done with OpenID. So we're seeing a lot of really interesting technical problems being solved with these open technologies. And to the point about figuring out the interaction design model, we're being forced through adopting enterprise customers to figure out how these technologies can also work in those places. I would love, for example, to see the Salesforce guys come and talk to us about activity streams. We've started having conversations with Atlassian and some other folks about what makes sense for enterprise activity streams. We've seen Social Text have their own version of this stuff, which I don't believe is supporting the format. Meanwhile, we've seen Socialcast actually adopt the activity streams format. And in those places where we're seeing companies really embrace this stuff, I think it's going to really accelerate the kind of collaboration that we can do and the kind of ad hoc bindings of unaffiliated products that become much better and much more powerful as they support these technologies. I mean, these technologies that we want to use are designed to be generative, so that we don't actually know necessarily how they're going to be used, but we can kind of build the structure so that you can, put them together like building blocks. And Salesforce would be a great example of something that could make use of a lot of these technologies and protocols, with or without the involvement of Google, that would actually, I think, benefit them and enhance their integration story down the road.
Yeah, Salesforce is already using open social APIs to plug stuff together there as well.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a big chunk of what Atlassian was showing off too. Is there's the sort of gadgets piece, and then there's the auth back and forth. The interesting thing about the Google launch is that what it does is get around the auth problem and the user interface problems that Chris has been talking about for a long time by making it the site administrator's job to auth once and for all users, and then everything can flow back and forth very cleanly and quickly. So in a way, it's giving the enterprise users, because they have someone they can delegate the authorization trust issues to, it gives them a head start of being able to plug stuff together. So I think that for me, that was the interesting part of what they'd shown there, which was, Chris is, as we speak, preparing a presentation to talk about these auth issues, because I've been seeing his go by his Flickr screen. That is one answer to that, is let one person delegate that for others.
Last thoughts, Brett?
I guess my last thoughts are it's really cool being here in Austin and getting a chance to talk to the Gowalla guys in person finally. It was really cool telling them and talking to them more about how we want Buzz to pull in GeoRSS data so that Gowalla could be the best client for doing GeoRSS publishing. And I think when you tell someone that, their head almost explodes, because they're like, "Wait, you want me to do this, and you guys want to help our site grow?" And it's like, "Yes, we do. It's good for everybody." And so that's my last thought. It's nice seeing the little guys feel the love.
And Chris, I think you've already sort of wrap things up, but if you
want
one more shot.
The only thing that I would add is just a plug for my panel, or actually my talk tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. I figure everyone's going to be hungover, so it should be really exciting and interesting, but I will be talking about activity streams and maybe providing a little more of a conceptual and historical bounding, bringing up Glertner and his work and the activity theorists, and maybe giving a little sense for how this stuff actually relates to the real world, because it's a lot of techie nerdery right now, but where this stuff all goes, hopefully, is stuff that touches people's lives in a way that actually is meaningful. Blah blah
blah. Kevin?
Yeah, I'd go along with it. Go to Chris's thing. Also, I was talking with Gavin Bell today, and he's trying to set up a meetup around the activity theory, the sort of the higher level social theory of that, because two of the experts of that are based in Austin. So look out for that this week too. We're trying to find a time and date that'll work to have a sort of high level social theory discussion, as well as the medium level technology and motivation discussions we're having here too.
Well, I'm really glad that Brett and Chris, that you were released from PR purgatory and were able to come on the show. And I hope that you'll continue to make yourself available to this kind of interaction, and we can bring some other people. I'll see if I can get somebody from Salesforce to come and join this next time we do it.
Sure.
Sounds great.
This is Steve Gillmor. This has been the Gillmor Gang. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. And I, of course, want to thank Rackspace for sponsoring the show, without whom this would not be happening, as well as NewTek and their fabulous TriCaster. And it was nice to see Leo Laporte. Bye.